All right. Hey, good evening. All right. Okay. I think I'll just go ahead and dive on in. We're going to have some people following us probably on Facebook. All right. It's kind of a interesting chapter. Most of the early chapters I noticed kind of paved the way for the chapters later on. So it was really kind of interesting. It gave some good information, but it wasn't like Cooper where it dove into to a specific topic and gave you a lot of background information, kind of set you up for more information down the road. But it was pretty cool.
I have never read this book. I only have glanced like Cooper a few sections, but I'm very interested and eager to hear from this book that you guys have spoken about it. That is simple and is not as aversive as Cooper.
Oh, it's definitely not as adverse as Cooper. We used it for my coursework instead of the Cooper. We used this book, and it was so much easier to read and prepare for quizzes and tests and whatever because of how easy it was to read. Granted,
Wow.
I probably should have read more than I had in course. I'll probably read more now than I did during the coursework, but nonetheless, I mean, it's cool how we're going chapter one and behavior lasting change, and then we're going chapter one in Cooper, and you're kind of you can see the the differences, but the comparisons.
Yeah.
Because next week in next week in Cooper, it actually will compare the concepts that we covered week one in behavior lasting change. And I had to go back to this study guide to kind of put the information together because it was more easy to understand for behavior. But then I like how Cooper does go deep.
Yeah. Sometimes whatever you don't get from this book, I mean, from Cooper, you get it from here, and then you go back and refer to Cooper originally, and I guess you get a broader understanding and a deeper, right? But thank you for doing this. I appreciate it.
Oh, it's no problem.
Because I don't have this book. I have never bought it, and I have heard so many things about it. Good things.
Pretty much everything in my notes comes from the book. I do a pretty good detailed outline to help me read.
Yeah, I saw it.
And cover the material. So most of that will be in here. So if you didn't read a chapter, you're going to get a pretty good idea after.
Fantastic. Yeah.
So you're in good shape. You are in good shape.
I'm glad. I'm lucky that I came and I'm following you. Thank you. Thank you for doing this. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you for being here. I mean, we're all in this together. There's no big eyes and little U's. We're a team trying to get this test passed.
Yeah, we will. We will.
I know we will. But let's go ahead and get started. Tonight, my Kansas City Chiefs are playing, so I got to at least, get ready to. I'm not a fan because they won. I've been a lifelong fan, so I've endured some pretty painful seasons. So I'm one of those guys that could tell you all that stuff. The big thing about this week, and like I said, you really had to kind of read and stay with it because it dove into the topic of intervention planning with your team and pros and cons and strategies and things you should be doing, and then it threw in some terms. It really put a lot of things to light even last week about how the things that we do in behavior analysis kind of need to be looked at. Like for example, I'm trying to do a whole new policy for my department in early childhood where I work at. So I set up, how I want to do things based on my BCBA supervisor. And then I had a lot of people, call me and text me and email me with strategies and suggestions to kind of tweak it. And then as I'm reading this week and this weekend, it was kind of a little bit last minute, and going through the chapter and putting it all together, it really kind of made sense. I can't assume my staff knows what to do. I can't assume a one-size-fit-all strategy will fit every need, every problem, every inappropriate behavior. So I'm going to have to do more training before the IEP implementation meeting. I'm going to have to do more professional development to train staff on different concepts and different strategies to build that in their repertoire. That's a big reason why I put the question last night on our Facebook page. We always know what we should do, but sometimes we forget, not so much ethically and not so much morally and not so much technically. It's interesting to really kind of see the things that we just kind of need to incorporate when we're involving people. You can't take for granted that if you're in education, that your teachers and paras and whoever knows exactly what you're talking about. You can't assume if you're in a clinical setting that your RBTs know exactly what you're talking about. You can't assume anything, and we can't assume that everyone knows exactly, where to step in at. So it's really important to train, and it really is important to have those things. And it's not so much that we have them just to have them. It also helps with buy-in. It helps with teachers knowing what's going on. It really does. They understand what you're doing, and it kind of just spreads the word out. But the first step in this chapter was familiar yourself with the client and the client setting. That's pretty easy to think about when we think about education or clinic or anywhere. Know your clients, know your setting. You need to be understanding of where that client is and where the learning and who's involved takes place. Mayer said before we do anything, we must inform ourselves about the history of the clients and other organizations. And here's a key word here: identify the key sources of influence. The teacher, paraprofessional, an aide, an RBT, a parent. We have a lot of people involved with our clients, and you really need to make sure, especially in education, I've noticed those environmental things make a big difference, especially in the classroom. Those key sources of influence. Well, we need to look for factors that affect both adaptive and challenging behavior. I put in social and personal help skills in the maladaptive part because I really want us to stop to think about that, because a lot of our EBI programs focus on social skills and language. There are adaptive skills tests or assessments that look at maladaptive behaviors. Well, those are the things that we're looking at when we do an education review or a records review or any kind of review. Is those maladaptive skills? Does it match up? What kind of social and personal help skills do we have? Can they do it? Can they not do it? What do we have on the forefront versus just coming in there and knocking out this one-size-fit-all program? We need to learn more about what's going on. That's a big push I'm making this year for myself professionally. We really need to figure out the classroom, the behaviors, the client, everything involved, because this grocery list of evidence-based practices or this grocery list of strategies, it doesn't always work. What worked with this one client doesn't always work over here. Now, granted, we're going to talk a little bit about how we're going to compare. When we pull that research article with that great strategy, that great intervention, we want to look for similar situations, similar environments, similar things. You're never going to find an article that matches up to a T exactly what you're looking at. There's not enough articles out there, but there's enough to be similar. to help us out. I put the bottom of the paper, bottom of the slide here. Client is those receiving the intervention or treatment. Kind of obvious. When you have a younger group, like mostly I serve right now, you do have to have the parents are involved. They're not necessarily the client, but they're a big part of the team. That's where I'm gonna get consent, and that's where I'm gonna get a lot of things at. But nonetheless, the client who is receiving our services. Our main job is to determine which of those or any other parties will abet or possibly impede the change process. Basically, that says in a nutshell, who's going to help or who's going to hurt our intervention. We're never going to have buy-in right away. They want, most teachers, and I used to be a teacher, we want an immediate fix. We have a classroom full of kids, we have a lot going on. I know realistically that can't happen, but that's what's really going on. But there are teachers and there are parents and there are people that are willing to work on both sides of the coin. And it's important to get involved with them because, we need people who are going to help our interventions, not challenge it and test it and then watch our results go down. We also need to see how currently operating contingencies of reinforcement can be adjusted to meet the common goal of injury reduction. Do we have consequences that support or obstruct constructive change? Everyone loves a token board. Everyone loves the penny board. And there's a contingency of reinforcement, but we also need to adjust the common goals also. I might be missing that one a little bit, but we just need to figure out what works for that individual child, that individual client. You need to inform yourself of those elements that require a records review, talking with staff that work directly with the client or target problem, and observing and recording behavior. I put conducting baseline data. You need to figure out what's going on. In a school setting that I do, the records review is vital. It's super important. I can look at the IEP, I can look at their adaptive testing, social skills, maladaptive, just on the violin alone, and then kind of pull some conclusions. I need to talk to staff. What's going on? What works, what doesn't work? I love how Greg Hanley, stated, when you ask a parent how they stop the behavior, that usually gives you a strong reinforcer, and that strong reinforcer can help you turn on and turn off that behavior. That's our goal. When we do all the indirect work on the forefront, we learn so much information that helps us plan and strategize and do all those things down the road. I think I'm looking at my indirect stuff right now with a few of my clients, and just it's eye-opening when you study and you start doing and you put it all together, and it's just amazing stuff. But that records review is important. Does the client need a medical review, or do they have one? Do they have a diagnosis? Are they taking medication? All these outside things that can affect, all these things that can come in, these antecedents that can come in and affect the behavior. And in the classroom, who's he talking to? What works? What have y'all been doing? And then you get a good idea of what the parent and the teacher has done and they're comfortable with, and then what things we need to train for and spend that time with. At this point, you choose or design a preventative intervention system. I had to put something in there a little bit also. A functional assessment is key to help identify the function and help design that treatment package. But nonetheless, Mayer also talks about organization-wise, because ABA can be used for a multitude of things, not just autistic and a plethora of different types of clients. So, at this point, you have a good idea after your indirect and your direct and all that, but the functional assessment is really key. You don't want to skip that. You don't want to skip those things that provide real data to help you understand what you need to do. But nonetheless, this is what Myers was trying to get to. The information we have right now can kind of help us with a good strategy or suggestion at this point. like I tell a lot of my parents and a lot of my teachers, I'm kind of stuck. They have to qualify for services, special ed services, before I can provide, ABA services. So, I can't go the full deal, but by doing a lot of indirect assessments and doing a lot of, records review and talking to everybody, I can come up with a good idea or a strategy that can help and try to reduce a little bit of that inappropriate behavior, if I can't get all the way involved, or kind of give me something to help out while I'm doing all this stuff. Um, Parents and teachers, they can't always wait forever for the results of a functional assessment as well. That's why it's always helpful to be always involved. Um, when faced with the challenge of preventing problems or improving their performance of individuals or groups, the organization's operating system or culture needs to be analyzed. You got to look at what's going on. Oftentimes we have this one size fit all. This is how we're going to do things. This is how I was raised. This is how things are supposed to be, and we forget about the cultural differences and all kinds of stuff going on. I think Nick was reminds us a lot on those Sunday morning Zooms about how different the culture is over there and the things that he's had to tune to make sure support is provided correctly because of there's cultural things, and cultural is not just across a different country. It's things that a certain amount of group of people do all the time. There's cultures around us all over the place, but you need to understand what's going on. If you're doing home health, you need to understand the family's needs and how the family does things. Schools, it's really important to understand the policies. Each school is really kind of their own culture. You also need to recognize that by avoiding problematic or challenging behavior in the first place, participants will be more apt to maintain their efforts. Um, Everybody wants that home run in the beginning. And everyone needs some limited success to maintain it for the long run. We need buy-in. No matter how great your functional assessment was, or how great your plan is, or how $1 million strategy you have, if there's no buy-in from your teachers, there's no buy-in from your parent, there's no buy-in from the RBTs, we can't change anything. We can't create a culture of change, and we can't even create that optimism that we need also. But by providing those proactive strategies and helping them on the forefront just a little bit while we're trying to get through all this, makes a big difference. I know teachers, especially, they want help, and they only have to, and when they have that immediate success, that immediate buy-in, or they see success, then they start getting more buy-in. That's why it's also important to do more professional development. Have more parent meetings and train as many people as you can. Not so ABA could be the coolest thing in the block, but so people understand what we do and can practice and try these things, and it builds our community. Everyone needs to be aware of, or committed to, and capable of fluently practicing skills consistent with the organization's or family's goals. We need to be focused on those goals. I think sometimes we lose track, we lose sight. We get focused on skill development, or we get focused on a particular skill or a particular social skill or this or that. We lose sight of the family's goals. If you stop and remember, the applied dimension is a socially, acceptable goal. Are we improving the lives of that child? Are we improving the lives of that client? And how are we doing so? And are we being consistent? Like I said earlier, those professional developments and parent meetings, they train. I think I've done more this year than I ever have in the past. And it's not just so everyone knows about Patrick Schoenberger, it's about so people know about basic concepts of ABA and how they can apply them to the classrooms. Or when I do I wrap up a functional assessment and we're creating goals and strategies and all that stuff collaboratively, they have a little bit of background knowledge of what I'm talking about. It's not all completely a foreign language. They have a little bit of understanding, and we could build on that. Programming success may well depend on a consideration of cultural factors, especially during the selection of goals and treatment strategies. Um, you always want to create some success, but you also want to create that success based on the individual needs of the client and that family. You need to involve key people. It's not just involving people, period. You need to involve people that are going to be very supportive from the beginning to the end. Like I said earlier, there are people that are looking for an immediate success, an immediate fix, an immediate whatever. And we can't promise that. We really can't promise that. The BACB board won't let us promise that. But we need people in their natural environment. And this promotes generalization. When parents are on board and pairs are on board and everyone's on board, and that skill can go from one place to another without constant training. I mean, that's our goal. That's what we're trying to go for anyways. For example, paras and key teachers involve the client need to be willing to be supportive at the beginning of the process. Like I said a few slides back, we don't have buy-in. We don't have anything. We sure are not going to get from the client immediately because he doesn't understand or figure out what we're trying to do, period. But we need to get that and grow and build that with the key people involved. If we can't help them be successful and show them how successful these things can be, we're going to lose them. And that's why it's so important to get them involved and have their support. We need to determine available resources. I mean, this kind of goes down to money and all those different things too, but you need to be aware of what you have. We need to familiarize ourselves with the physical, material, and human resources in the family or organization we're going to change. We need to learn about their values and concerns and habit patterns. We just need to be aware of what's going on. What do we have? What are we going to work with? And all those different things. We need to see what adjustments might be required within the system. Do we have to make a safety plan? Do we have to make organizational changes? If you go to an OBM model, is there a staffing? Is there more prompts we needed? Is there an organization? It's kind of a bigger adjustment system going on. Because I don't think we're going to have too many big changes in the world of school that we can do. And then the clinic, we just kind of have what we have. But we just need to be aware of, is there any adjustments that we could do? There's a client that I'm working with, and we're just, we're trying to figure out what we have and what we can use. May need additional services and materials necessary to carry out the program as designed. This is definitely something I'm looking at right now. I'm on an autism team, and I serve our area preschools and early childhood by identifying, but that's not enough. So I want to create an assessment to create additional services and do more skill building. So I need to look out for additional services and materials to carry out that kind of program. And I'm working on that, training for a skill building assessment. We're going to probably do the ABLs because that's what we're going to look at right now. But I'm looking at additional services and materials I could use to carry out programs I want to do. I don't want cookie cutter programs. I don't want one size fit all deal. I don't want to identify a child educationally for autism and say, okay, that's it. I want to do more. And I think by looking for more materials to carry out those programs, it helps. Once everything is in place, we select similar procedures known under similar circumstances. I mentioned this earlier. We're not looking for that. PRT doesn't fit every model or every problem. Incidental teaching is same, or discrete trial. You need to look for a similar procedure that fits that mold. You have to look under similar circumstances. Like Brad said, from the Psych Corps guys, I said it earlier, you're not going to find a research article on every single intervention strategy or complex or inappropriate behavior ever known to man. You're not. But you are going to find similar procedures. I've been trying to do some research on fears and phobias and trying to come up with an intervention strategy, for that. Well, I can't find a research article that's to the T exactly what I'm looking at. So I'm looking at similar articles with similar treatment plans, with similar fears and stuff that, that will benefit. If materials and resources are not adequate and effective change across elements, we go back to the drawing board and we adjust things. Basically, if you're trying to swing for the fences and you don't have all those resources available, then you need to go back to the drawing board and adjust your objectives for what you do have. Special ed is beautiful because it's laid out to address individual needs of our clients. So, in theory, those things are available. We don't really would need to go back to the drawing board so much. But in most cases, you don't have that option. So, if you don't have these resources available, then you need to look at what you do have. Any programs that are applied behavior analytic must include critical features such as choosing and using valid, reliable measures, demonstrating treatment fidelity, and analyzing the function of the treatment. I don't know about the whole world. I don't know about the whole country. I don't know about different states. I know that there are a lot of people that are working under the ABA umbrella. They are providing applied behavior analytic services, but do they have these critical features? Do they have these things that we just mentioned? I'm not sitting on a soapbox right now. I'm not condemning nor am I approving, those different programs, but they're there. Those kids are getting good services. Those kids are getting the things they need. But when you slap that ABA term on things, it's a whole new game changer. And I don't think that we fully understand, at least the people outside of what we do, understand how big of a game changer that really is. At least it's been for me. I have been part of ABA programs, and ever since I've been studying in this journey for the last year, I've learned there's a lot more to than what there is. That's a good thing. That's a good thing. But we must ensure that our measures are reliable by assessing IOA. I put believability in there because I love Ryan's point last week or the week before about how IOA is really believability. Those two people are watching what's going on, and it's having that, believability, that believable part of what they saw. And we need that. We don't want observer bias. We don't want observer drift. We don't want it to be what we think it's supposed to be. We don't want to change it all the time. We want it we want it to be what it's supposed to measure and what it's supposed to treat. That we are implementing the treatment as designed by objectively assessing the fidelity which we implement it. We have procedural fidelity. We have treatment fidelity for a reason. We want our treatments, we want our interventions to be valid, to have that external, that internal validity. We want accuracy. Those aren't just terms we're throwing around. Those are things we need to have. And that builds the strength, that builds that validity of our experiment or our treatment. It's really important to have those things. I mean, if it didn't matter, then it wouldn't be here. And to be really honest, we need those things to keep it conceptually systematic. We need it to make it analytic. I kind of was trying to combine a little bit here on these slides because I kept trying to put as much in for my study guide. We're going to select behavioral objectives collaboratively. I'm going to use special education as an example because I'm involved in special ed. The team makes decisions. We don't want to have predetermined goals. We don't want to have everything here. This is how we're going to do it. We want mom involved. We want that sped teacher involved. We want everybody involved, the therapists or whatever, making these decisions and making ideas for goals. My first functional assessment was like that. We came in, the SPED teacher came in with the goals and objectives, and they're great goals. But then, my supervisor pointed out that here's our findings. Mom, what do you think? Or is that goal really going to work for this? Not really. That cookie cutter reinforcement strategy doesn't always work. It's a great strategy, but it doesn't always work. So you want to have everyone involved. And besides, it's kind of like when I have my kids in school help make rules. When they're a part of the process, it's easier to have buy-in. Formal or informal organizational or family leaders generally control the client's most potent reinforcers of punishment. There are people that are involved, once again, that can either help or hurt the process, formally or informally, and we have to be aware of those people. We have to select goals also that aren't too hard, but aren't too easy. We want that success, but at the same time, we don't want to make everything unachievable. I put the last part in there. Buy-in and cooperation is essential. You're probably going to hear that throughout the whole thing tonight. Buy-in, buy-in, buy-in. I heard it from a guy in the spring before this whole COVID broke out, and he made some great points. He had a very interesting book about, I think it's called Angry Kids Don't Punch You in the Face or something like that. But he's right. If you don't have buy-in from a teacher, where's your intervention going to go? You definitely don't have buy-in from the client right away. But we get so frustrated. We have this great strategy, this great intervention, this great everything, and then it didn't work. Or it didn't work in 2 weeks. You got to be patient, but we need everyone involved. We're also going to analyze the function of the current contingencies. We need to attempt to analyze the reasons for the current challenge. Why is this going on? Why? We know the main function of behavior is to get out of something. And we need to find out that why. We can't figure out the why until we can't figure out the how we're going to fix it until we figure out the why and why is it going on. It's really, really important. And I think we forget about that a lot. I've been really pushing for that so far this year. And I'm trying to make some changes, and I'm still a work in progress, but I'm in the right direction. And I think by looking for the why, I'm able to come up with good interventions. Because not everything's attention-based. Discovering the explanation is important and critical because depending on the answer, change the method of intervention would differ. Everyone's always like, it's for attention, it's attention seeking, it's attention seeking, it's attention seeking. Well, you're a functional analysis and it's not. It's escape. So it's really important to not always assume. And also, if you always assume, you're also looking for that function during the assessment. So just, keep an open mind and understand and analyze what's going on. What's really happening with that client. The same cookie cutter intervention doesn't always work with everybody. I love token boards. I love tabulators. I love penny boards. I love group contingencies. But they don't always work with everybody. Sometimes, this strategy works better, and sometimes this strategy works better. That's one thing I hear all the time in my job is, what's your favorite, what's he willing to work for? Let's find that out. So he's always going to work for trains and he's always going to work for cars. Well, why don't we just figure out why he's doing it? Maybe he needs to be taught a skill. Maybe he can't do something, so he needs to be taught that skill even more. It's so much involved that we forget about. But in teachers' defense, we have a pretty full plate, and we don't have time. I jumped far ahead. We don't have time for everything. All right, we're going to select or design change methods. Once you do your functional assessment and you've done your direct and your indirect and all that beautiful stuff and your analysis to figure out the function, now we can start looking at interventions and change methods and treatment packages and all that great stuff and what we need to do now with our client. We also need to look at environmental considerations. I can't stress that enough. If you're going to use an antecedent-based strategy, you really need to look at those environmental considerations and variables. They're super important for what we do. Do we need to separate a few clients in the classroom? Do we need to do a high request, low request kind of thing? I love the feedback on behavioral momentum and how it's different from high P, low P. You just need to know your kids. Seek, apply, and evaluate the function of relevant evidence-based practices. The book really, really stresses with being current. When I was a teacher, the education stressed the same thing. That really goes into any field that you're in. If you stick out with ABA or you do something else, or even you did whatever you did before now, you have to be relevant. You have to know what works. And in our case, we're looking at evidence-based practices. When I was a teacher, I looked at different classroom management strategies, the new trends and new this, plus to read magazines and, current education stuff. And I didn't. I don't know why, but this whole behavior thing has just stepped up my game professionally. And I always really get into whatever I do, but I've really enjoyed this. So it's not hard for me to open up a journal or look at something or really pull out things. Like I said the other day, last week I was looking through research articles trying to find a strategy for one of my clients. 2 years ago, before I even started this behavior journey, I was, going to PBIS website and trying to find cookie cutter strategies to fix a problem, put a Band-Aid on it. And now I'm trying to find research articles or journals or my Cooper or my Mayer and just find evidence-based strategies that work and really dig deeper in the why. Evidence-based approach, choose and use procedures scientifically found to work effectively with clients and similar to yours. There's a reason why autistic clients are just full of evidence-based practices when they use ABA because it works and the research shows it works. We just need to get more people in other circles to realize that it's not just for autistic clients, it's for a lot of different people. I'm blown away from the people that how applied behavior analysis is used, but there's a reason why it's sought. There's a reason why it's a growing field. There's a reason why everyone likes our interventions. There's a reason why reinforcement's highly thought of, because they work. And we have research to back it up. Can you imagine 20, 50, 100 years from now, all the research articles that we're going to have by then? Because we are a relatively young field compared to other fields. If you really stop and think about it, can you imagine what we're going to have down the road and what we could pull from? I mean, it's mind-blowing. It really is. We also need to select or devise behavioral measures. We need to consider how to monitor and evaluate performance before proceeding further. Data. We need to be able to measure what we're doing. Can't stress that one enough. Data. We also need to prepare for constructive behavioral support and change. A lot of follow-up. COVID makes it nice, and, especially in the education behavior part, makes it nice. I'm able to, do more follow-up and able to go back here or go there or go there. You had to have follow-up, and you had to figure out what's going on. You had to put a lot of investment in there. We're not just swinging for the fences and here's, one shot deal at the beginning. We're looking for something that works, data to help determine if it's working, and follow up to either make adjustments as needed. Everyone involved in change process needs to gain reinforcers for their positive contributions. And if they're not being reinforced, then their efforts are not sustained. So we want people to be reinforced for what's going on. We want those desired behaviors to increase, and we want them to feel better about what's going on. Problem prevention activities need to be integrated as part of the family's organization's day-to-day operation, not just as so often the case in emergency situations. We always think of when something bad happens, what do we do? Well, that's why I really like proactive antecedent strategies. They're ongoing. We're trying to change those antecedents, those setting events, to where we're not always reacting. If we do a better job of juggling a checkbook and financial issues, we won't have shortfalls all the time. If we're having a low set of scores academically, we need to figure out ways to build those scores up. A lot of academic stuff kind of models the ABA stuff if you stop and think about it. The different tiers, the different, setups. The system must be immobilized to create an ongoing reinforcement mechanism to support and sustain behavior change practices regardless of the temporary crisis. We're not looking for band-aids. We're looking for long-term fixes. And that's a big part of what we do. Of course, when you're in the heat of the battle and you're in the heat of the crisis, you need help now. But if we can get our contingency managers on board with, our change practices and what we're doing and certain mechanisms, it'll last way beyond when we're there. I know some people in some preschools that have worked with ABA programs, and they do them in their classroom because they work and they've been a part of that. Organize and manage team operation. Effective teams remain ongoing, are integrated within the organization's program, designed to continue independent of leadership changes and are in the best position to help establish goals and priorities. We're looking for teams. We're looking for groups to be involved. A principal may change, a director may leave, but the staff, the group involved is always a constant. And we want them to be in the best position always. What's great for the child, what's great for the client. My mayor even reminded us that it takes a village to raise a child. I think I've mentioned that some of my stuff at work. We need everybody involved. Everyone making a big push for social, emotional stuff and how schools need to do more of this. But we need the village. We need the village doing co-regulation. And then it generalizes into self-regulation or maintains as well. We need the village, to help us with those skills when we're not always around. There's a reason why if the SPED teacher, the OT, the classroom teacher, the special ed teacher, and the behavior specialist, they have the same plan, then the whole team sees progress with the client. Team structure can produce highly effective intervention plans. If everyone's working together, it makes a big difference. If at-home therapy is doing things differently than the school stuff, then they need to get together and have a meeting and talk about words, phrases, mans, tags, anything that both people are doing. I did that actually my first year. We needed to get on the same page. The team needed to be. So the speech, the SPED, the general ed, everyone got there and we talked about what works. And we saw a major change in the client's behavior for the weeks to come because we knew what it took. Members in the group promote collaborative problem solving and provide ongoing support to those responsible for implementing the program or intervention. It's group support. I mean, stop and think about the Rocket Study Group. We provide collaborative problem solving and ongoing support for each other. That's why I'm here. That's why you guys are here. We're supporting each other. And obviously, we're not implementing intervention. Maybe it's to pass the test, but that collaboration makes a big difference. It really does. Then the book turns into organize the team operation thing some more. It goes into the positive behavior support team. It goes into the student success team, and then it goes into we'll call tier area prevention. A lot of schools have positive support team. I've never been a part of one. We don't have a lot of those in our childhood. We have a lot of them fixed. But nonetheless, this is what Mayer tells us PBST is. It includes all responsible stakeholders, and they're focused on prevention, primary prevention. These are your tier 1, tier 2 supports. Not every behavior is a tier 3. Those are your very, very high risk. That's like a very low percentage. When you look at who I serve, I serve all 3, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. Positive behavior support team, I don't have one, but I do work with a lot of daycare providers in our area, as well as people that can reach out to all of them and really work on examining primary prevention, a lot of forefront stuff. Sometimes classroom management is all it takes. Sometimes it takes training to be a stronger teacher. I mean, sometimes we just got to fix a few things here and there, and then we got everything done. The next level 2 is those things didn't work with Johnny or Susie, so we got to step up our game a little bit. We need to look at doing small group tutoring, some social skills training. Our kids are at risk. We got to step up our game a little bit. That's where student success team, to me, where it kind of looks like. The prevention thing at the bottom, it really looks at that high level, that functional behavior assessment. If you're doing baseline data and you're doing all the things that you need to do, you're able to understand what kind of supports you need to put in place. I serve several different clients, like I said before, and I have one client where I did baseline data, and now I know the classroom just needs preventative approaches. I have another kid where it really sounds like it's a level 3, but it really might just boil down to social skill training and just some good goals in his IEP to help him understand conflict and tolerance. Because I am dealing with 3 and 4-year-olds. And, grown-ups have a hard time with the word no. Kids do too. They really do. And I said before the bottom, that individualized, that therapy, that other services. I mean, this is where we're really bringing in outside services, mental health, or other things that really need to be involved to prevent those behaviors. But unfortunately, we label everybody a tier 3 because we can't handle what's going on. Client behavior change program development and selection. Despite demonstrated effectiveness with similar clients, sometimes the contingency managers reject goals or the methods of the intervention. It's not working. It's not working immediately. I'm done. This happens a lot. It really does. We don't want to wait 4 to 6 weeks. We need to wait 4 to 6 days. I'm sorry. But we do have that problem. You must feel confident that the program that you plan will be implemented faithfully to accomplish its purpose. All these things I'm saying tonight, it doesn't mean, hold on 1 second. Sorry about that. I texted earlier and he was supposed to call me, and he's my world. He hasn't been up here for a while, so he's fixing to come up here pretty soon, so I'm stoked. I figure at this
That's
point.
fine, no worries.
What's that?
That's fine, no worries. Don't worry.
And it wouldn't be long because he goes to bed at 8 o'clock. So I was like, that's kind of a short. Usually he'll talk to me for an hour at a time. I mean, he'll talk. Well, and he'll watch the sports game. He'll put me on, and we'll just watch it together from our different households. But he lives in Louisiana, and I live in Arkansas. That's a big reason why we. But I chose to move up here, so.
Thank you. Appreciate your sacrifice.
But Arkansas has been good to me. I wouldn't be in behavior, and I wouldn't be as aspiring ABA, BCBA if it wasn't for Arkansas.
Ooh.
All right, where was I at? Oh, the buy-in part. Okay. I bet everyone on Facebook's like, he stopped talking. Plan for generalization. When I was putting this up there, I thought it was really cool because isn't that our ultimate goal? Is to, our client to generalize the skill across settings and subjects and, situations, and to maintain that skill also without us around. So we also need to put that in consideration when we plan, when we create our strategies, create our intervention package. We need to, what specific behaviors do we want them to generalize in different environments? Getting the biggest bang for the buck, according to Meyer, demands careful planning, though. Finding and securing the services of capable, eager managerial and service personnel of affordable, safe, appropriate physical space and sufficient funds to support and furnish them with adequate materials and supplies. Whew, that was a mouthful. But I think what they're trying to say was it's not so much trying to utilize every ounce of service, every ounce of money. We need to get the adequate amount, the right amount of intervention out of it, support. Treatment integrity. It's also called procedural fidelity. The big part of what we do. That's why I don't think it really separates us from a lot of the things too, in my opinion, because this treatment integrity really shows our studies and our papers and all that stuff, how great our interventions are for replication too. This refers to ensuring that everyone involved carries out and supports an intervention as planned. We don't want it to go sideways. We don't want it to go based on what the observer wants when we're not there. There's a reason why we need to be technical and really need to be detailed for what we're looking for and how we want it. The higher the treatment integrity, the more effective the outcomes. That makes sense. If everything's lined up the way it's supposed to be in the treatment, then we're going to have an effective outcome. All of this part was really neat. That's why I threw it in there for Meyer. About 52 published court decisions noted the first thing hearing officers look at when making a decision is whether the behavior intervention plan was implemented as planned. That's why I put IEPs in there. An IEP is a legally binding document. It's not just a piece of paper with SPED goals and objectives. It's a legally binding document. If you're going to put behavioral goals or any type of goal, accommodations, modifications, anything, you need to have detailed supports on what you're going to provide. My biggest gripe has been behavior specialist as needed. What does that mean? But if we have specific goals and specific interventions, that helps treatment integrity. Because if you go to court and you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing, you're going to get dinged. And there's a lot of special ed cases out there. A lot of them out there. A demonstrable, clear, accurate description of the intervention that the behavior analysts apply is essential because consumers of our literature often are searching for strategies to apply with their own settings. You have this home run intervention, this home run strategy, but you couldn't describe it. How are you going to share it? Kind of like in teaching when I taught. If I had a substitute teacher fill in for me, and I never liked having a sub fill in for me because I love teaching my class. But if I was gone, I'd have to come up with very detailed descriptions of what I wanted my class to do, what assignments, what chapters, what things they're working on. But it wasn't the same without me because it was so driven by me. Well, in ABA, we get the luxury of that technical part of our dimension where we can describe something to where somebody else can do that home run like we did. Granted, your lesson plans are supposed to have all that stuff as a teacher, but when someone replicates our intervention, our strategy, our study, that's the ultimate compliment. That means we are very descriptive and something's working. But we gotta have treatment integrity because if it falls apart, can't really share it. Generally, the more acceptable the intervention, the more likely it will be implemented. There are a variety of factors that influence the acceptability of an intervention. What the treatment is called. Mayer had a great page, and that's why I put a question last night about technical terms versus, everyday terms. I find myself, the more I study, the more I learn, the more I get ready for the test, the more I want to use ABA terms, and I come off like, he is awesome. And then that's why I love the professional development. It was very humbling. Can't talk to everyone at work the way I talk to you guys. I gotta break it down even simpler. Jargon is not gonna get you anywhere. You have to make everything relatable. The severity of the client's problem. You have to understand where that client's problem's at, the time and effort involved, familiarity with the knowledge of the behavioral principles. You don't know what's going on, you need to get somebody who does. The more they believe the intervention will work, the more they are acceptable, they're likely to find it. Basically, the more things work, the more success they have, the more they're going to keep looking for you. Positive interventions tend to be more acceptable than punitive ones. Punishment, we'll have a different day for that discussion, but reinforcement works. There's a reason why we go to reinforcement first. There's a reason why we look for positive reinforcement first, and then we seek punishment. Not saying we don't do punishment, but there's a reason why we seek reinforcement first. We also need to ensure a textual fit when selecting goals and interventions. Everything needs to fit with the skill set, the resources, the values, the setting, who's involved. Everything makes a big difference. It really, really does. We also need to assign high priority to interventions that contingency managers can implement with relative ease. If they can't do it, then they can't implement it. But it's not so much that they don't have a prior skill set. If they don't, then we need to teach. If they don't understand, we need to teach. But once they have that success, then they're more likely to keep doing it. But if they have to keep, adjusting and they're just, fall off the tracks, then there goes your intervention. Those 3 guys or 4 guys developed a goodness of it assessment questionnaire, and it really kind of looked at different training experimental backgrounds to help implement particular programs. Contingency managers need training to a reasonable level of fluency. This was on last night's deal. I put this in here with something else. We take for granted, at least I do, speaking for me, that we have a goal, we have the intervention, and everyone knows what we're talking about. You know, they need to have a reasonable level of fluency, but we need to train them on their performance levels and build that comfort zone. Actions you can take to increase the likelihood that personnel will adhere faithfully to the specified treatment protocol are invited to for participation in just about everything we said tonight. Goals, procedures, methods, and then we want to see reinforcement in their efforts. Select the interventions collaboratively. We need, once again, just like we made our goals and we came up with our whatever, we want everyone involved. We want a team approach. If we involve them in, then we also know their limitations and their concerns and where they're at. We also need to facilitating goal intervention selection, use suggestions for enabling the selection of appropriate goals. Interventions include these steps by Meyer or Mayer. That one I know right now. You know, you're developing solutions and strategies together. Base individual strategies on assessment and their skill, the manager's skill. You know, the assessment tells us where the child's at or the client's at, but we also need to understand where that their skill set as well. Periodically paraphrase what the contingency manager is saying to convey your empathy, attention, and understanding. If they're confused about something, or you can tell they're confused, what can I do to make it better? This was part D on the question last night. Summarize the contingency manager's main points with an ABC format. I threw y'all off on a curveball and I put stimulus response. ABC, we look at the antecedent, behavior, and consequence format. We make frequent use of I statements, and we check the listener's understanding. And we recheck. This was the question last night on the which two don't belong. And I changed the words around to kind of get a few people. We're just have a $1 million question. We're also going to use acceptable and comprehensible language to clarify contingency manager's tasks. This just basically means make everything understandable. I mean, you may have a $1 million idea, $1 million plan, but if they don't know how to do it, it's like when I taught T-ball. You know, I wasn't an athlete in high school, but the people I worked with knew baseball inside out and then some. But the way they talked to everybody was like, boom. And I just made it simple. I just had that knack. And when I did indoor soccer, same thing. Just keep it so simple. My kids can understand everything. And that's how ABA should be. You know, make it so simple, anybody and everybody can understand it. Should program implementers require some initial encouragement when operating the natural environment? And then fade intervention prompts. Everyone needs encouragement. And then eventually you're going to fade yourself out. Concrete items such as token boards and certificates and all those things to deliver praise or other reinforcing consequences or otherwise implement the program according to plan. I see this a lot in my field here where I'm at. You know, we love certificates, we love token boards, we love treasure boxes, we love all these things. Let's come up with a plan. Let's do that. Promote self-monitoring. We need to ask teachers to self-monitor the ratios of positive and negative interactions. We need to be self-monitoring, period. But it's understandable. Checklists. Those fidelity checklists, those are really cool for everybody. They need to understand what they need to do in the order they need to do it. What tasks we need to do. And there's a reason why they work. They're great for after trainings. Support the contingency manager's performance feedback. I'm getting to the end of the train here, guys. I'm almost there. Went over tonight, even I was going to go over anyways, looked like. Support for the contingency manager's performance feedback. You need to go back and provide the support. Just don't say, here's the plan, here's the intervention, here's a whatever. Simply explaining how to implement the intervention or providing instructions is often insignificant, insufficient. Here you go. Well, here's a little, or here's a rethink page. Here you go. Here's a whatever. We're good. I did ABA home for a while, and it was, oh, he's a special ed teacher. He'll be all right. Teach me. What do you want me to do? The things I've learned now, I've had to learn. And I hope I don't do that with people I end up supervising. But you need to teach everybody. Don't always assume and know what to do. Further actions are required prior to, during, and following training to enable personnel to master particular skills. Following training. You went to a training, he knows what to do. How many trainings do we go to? We're just there. So you need something after or prior to that training, or even follow up after, to make those skills come to use. Model, role play, directed rehearsal, do something training wise with that staff to really make sure everything we're doing is put in place. Don't always assume everyone knows what's going on. All right. Well,